look, I don't know the truth. I do my best. Dennis doesn't know the truth. He does his best. We got to collaborate to try to find the best set of ideas to deal with any particular problem.
Can you explain, Speaker, to us what the war resolution does and does not do for the president in terms of his freedom to act, and if there are any restraints on him over the long run?
Basically, I think the president has those responsibilities and has the right to do a lot of things even without that resolution. But one of the things we tried to do that was a change to say, you know, the Congress and the administration's in this together. Something that was a debate during the Kosovo action, or rather than a president going out and doing something and saying, here's the bill, you take care of it. It's the Congress is involved, the people in this country are involved with this, and here's some parameters, we're going to work together to fund it. So I think that's basically two things. We passed the appropriation bill to start. I don't know if it's the whole iceberg or it's just the tip of the iceberg, but the issue on the resolution is gives the president the ability to go out and start to try to find a resolution to the problem. And whether it's the use of force or it's the use of intelligence or all these things together, he has the ability to do that in consultation with the Congress. And I think that's what the Constitution says. It's within all the framework of law. And I think it was certainly adequate. And, you know, it got an overwhelming response in both the House and the Senate.
All right, Speaker Hastert, Leader Gephardt, thank you for a rare joint appearance, and I hope we have you back together on soon and often. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Now we are going to turn to the United States Senate, and we're joined by two decorated war veterans, Senators John McCain and John Kerry. Gentlemen, good morning. Good morning. Senator Kerry, you have both fought in Vietnam, and many people say that what we're looking at is a protracted form and a different form of guerrilla warfare. What do you foresee?
Well, I foresee a very long and very complex process ahead of us. There will be moments where there may be some more traditional confrontation, but there will be many more moments where there's going to be a longer, more clandestine effort that will demand patience by the American people. If we're going to do all the things we've talked about in the last days, and I believe, and I know John McCain does, we need to. I mean, this is not something where you can suddenly allow your concept of this to wane. And I noticed already today in the papers that European countries are trying to equivocate to some degree, and people are beginning to qualify the nature of their support. There is no qualification here. There is no equivocation about whether or not you are going to be part of the effort to literally ferret out these terrorist cells. Now, can we end it forever? No, we haven't ended any number of things forever. Prostitution, gambling, loan sharking, murder. I mean, there are things that represent evil, I suppose you might say, that we're always confronted with as human beings. But we can forever reduce the ability of people to believe that they can carry out this kind of attack with impunity or even mount this kind of attack in the future easily.
Senator McCain, former Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has argued that this moment offers a rare opportunity to go after a terrorist network before it has the ability to deploy nuclear or chemical and biological weapons. Is he right?
Oh, I think he's absolutely right. We've had indications for years that people ranging from Saddam Hussein to the North Koreans have attempted to acquire the capability to develop weapons of mass destruction and the means to deliver them. I want to go back to the question you asked John Kerry 1 second. I just finished rereading David Halberstam's book, The Best and the Brightest, which I think everybody has to read if they want to understand the Vietnam War. In the Vietnam War, we didn't ever really galvanize the American people behind the effort, and it was very difficult to do for obvious reasons, and I don't want to revisit the entire war. But I believe this is a dramatically different situation. I believe we have the leadership that will lead and motivate the country. I think the president is starting out by telling the American people this is a long, hard twilight struggle. I haven't heard light at the end of the tunnel used yet. And so I think it's a very different scenario. I believe Americans are clearly convinced that our national security and our way of life is at stake here. And I don't think that was ever the case in the Vietnam War.
Gentlemen, I'm also joined here on the set by Fox News Sunday panelist Mara Eliason. Mara?
Senator McCain, you talked a little bit about nuclear and biological weapons. Is it your understanding that groups like Al-Qaeda have the capacity to use those kinds of weapons now? We never were told about the possible scenario of a civilian hijacked aircraft crashing into a building. We've been heard about people with a backpack filled with anthrax.
I don't know. I'm not privy to that kind of intelligence information, but I have no doubt that Saddam Hussein continues, and I also have no doubt that there are much greater connection between nations and terrorist organizations than perhaps we appreciate. I noticed that the Iranians pledged their support. Well, I hope that the Iranians will now come clean on what happened at Khobar Towers. So I think that it's very clear that there has been state-assisted a relationship in these efforts, which is very hard to, frankly, differentiate.
Senator Kerry, where does this thing go from here? Who are we going to war with first? Is it Saddam Hussein? Is it what remains of the government of Afghanistan?
I think there's several tiers of that. The first tier almost certainly is Osama bin Laden and the Al-Qaeda and his network all across the world, I mean all across every country. And certainly a very significant number of countries, including our own, where there's strong evidence of the existence of those cells. The second would be those countries that directly harbor them, that directly sponsor them, directly support them, hide them, feed them, provide them with the supplies and the capacity to be able to do what they do. And the third would be the larger network of entities that are complicitous. For instance, money laundering, particularly. If you follow the money, you will once again find the trail here. Now, it's very difficult, we are told, in the case of Osama bin Laden, because it's not in Swiss banks. It's been reduced to a sort of, a different kind of network. But nevertheless, that money, to be effective for him, has to move through some legitimate channels. We've had a very hard time. I've been involved in the money laundering effort for a long time, the effort to stop it, and we are having a very difficult time getting people across the globe to recognize the seriousness of this. You've got all kinds of places, the Channel Islands, various places in Asia, other countries, the Cayman Islands, places where people have been able to facilitate the existence of these kinds of terrorist entities. And that has to stop. So there are a whole series of tiers of this. But I'd just comment further on what John said and answer that earlier question. You know, in Vietnam, people supported the effort initially. There were very few voices of dissent. The voices of dissent grew because of the way it was prosecuted, because of other differences that grew as time went on. We have to be very, very careful here and very certain that the way we choose to prosecute this continues to build the support not just of the United States but of the rest of the world, and that it does it in a way that adheres to the standards and principles of the United States. We don't want to become them in doing this.
Well,
we want to still adhere to our values, and that doesn't mean we don't attack. Of course we attack. Of course we take the offensive. And of course we have to be prepared to do the things you do in war. But we have to do it with a great deal of thought and not recklessly.
Well, does that include then toppling governments? The administration has talked about ending states that support this. Is that within the realm of possibility?
It is absolutely within the realm of possibility. But obviously there are many things that one can do prior to that you would hope would be successful without having to come to that. But look, this is not a passing fancy. This is not a moment of inflamed passion that it can be allowed to suddenly disappear. These people are attacking our entire way of life. They are threatening us and will continue to threaten us. And if we do not respond and literally cut it out at the heart, so to speak, then they will come back, and they will come back, and they will come back. And the lessons of history are going back to Munich and going back to other places, that if you don't recognize what's coming at you and you're not prepared to stand up at the right moment, then indeed it can get worse and you pay a higher price. I think we have no choice here, and I think most people in the United States Congress and even in the country understand that.
Senator McCain, earlier, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld was talking about the fact that we need to go after states that sponsor this, and if they do not give up the terrorists, we can go after them. They have capitals. He said they have identifiable targets. Let's talk about a little bit about the means. Would it be appropriate in some cases even to consider using tactical, that is, low-grade nuclear weapons in such a strike?
I think that you can't absolutely rule out any option, but there's so many ramifications of the use of a nuclear weapon that I don't believe that that would be a serious option, because I think there's so many other ways we could achieve the goals we seek. I just think there's something about the United States being the first country to use a nuclear weapon since Hiroshima and Nagasaki that we'd have great difficulties there, and I'm not sure it's necessary. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's not, given the state of weaponry and the state of technology that we have today.
What do you think is necessary, Senator McCain?
Oh, I think do not foreclose any option. I thought the grave mistake we made in the Kosovo situation was that we said we won't send ground troops. The President is preparing the American people that we will expend American treasure and perhaps American blood. We cannot foreclose any option, and if we do, then we will inhibit our ability to take these people down. The only way that they're going to come around, let's have a little straight talk here, is if they believe their existence is threatened, and that's why I think Secretary Rumsfeld is correct. These people have to understand that we are serious. We're not going to back off. We're in a long, hard struggle, and we do not intend to give up.
Senator Kerry, earlier on the broadcast, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier. Earlier on the broadcast, Attorney General Ashcroft was talking about a series of changes he thinks we need to do to improve our domestic vigilance. You referred to a bit of that when you were discussing money laundering. We have a series of laws that deal with drug dealers in terms of seizing their property, seizing their assets, the kinds of intelligence we can do on them, what we can do with their money, and so on. Do we need to apply that immediately to terrorists? And furthermore, do we need to be able to expand the FBI's ability to do domestic counterintelligence?
There is no question that we will have to change some of the laws in order to deal with terrorism. A lot of us have been trying to do that for some period of time in various sectors, and we've met with resistance because it was deemed to interfere with the normal course of business, or in some people's mind, to sort of weigh too heavily on one side of the balance of how we view our freedoms of the country. But this, I think, has changed that. I'm confident Congress will respond. But let me say one other thing we need to do. And some people will not probably appreciate this, but I think it's an honest statement of what the United States needs to do. Globalization and technology have changed the perception of the United States in the world. And there are many of us who feel that we have not been doing enough or sensitive enough to the way in which we are perceived by many countries. We need to not only be tough here, we need to not only respond and ferret out Osama bin Laden, but we need to also listen. We need to also be thoughtful in some of the policies so that we can build friendships and build relationships around the globe and not be alienating quite as many people as we have, I think. And also, we have to be particularly sensitive to the rest of Islam and the Islamic world. This cannot be done in a way that lumps everybody into the same pool. There are distinctions here. Osama bin Laden is a perversion of Islam. In fact, the Taliban, many of the leaders of the Taliban are not even trained deeply in religiously. They don't have a deep background in religious training. They have taken Islam and they are changing Islam. And what Islam itself needs is almost a reformation, if you will. It needs to stand up and speak to the world about its peacefulness and its ability to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And we need to be certain that we don't make matters worse in the ways in which we choose to do this. I think that is absolutely essential, and there's much we can do in our foreign policy, in my judgment, to be much more proactive, much more thoughtful, much more sensitive to the needs of the rest of this planet.
Senator McCain, we witnessed something quite extraordinary in Congress this week, which is the Senate unanimously, without debate or without much debate, passed this resolution allowing the president to do whatever was necessary to combat this.